Okay, Google.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations, check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we are again, Tall Tales Thursday. We've only got today and tomorrow, and we come to the end of another perfect week here on Tall Tales. So welcome aboard. You are now listening and perhaps watching the top-rated afternoon radio talk show on FM radio in the entire Western Pacific. It's a really great show. It's constitutionally oriented. It's conservative. And I would tell you more about the greatness of the show, except my overwhelming sense of modesty prevents me from going any farther with it. So let's start right out with Zemi Ikotny. And Zemi Ikotny is my backwards bilingual play on words. It translates literally to press the meat. We reverse that to meet the press, and it's the Guam equivalent of what NBC runs with Chuck Todd as the host, except it's a lot better. I analyze the offerings on the editorial pages of our two daily papers, usually criticize them one unmercifully, take a look at the other with my blue pencil, and award the coveted blue star to the better of the two. So far, the Guam Daily Post is way ahead. The Daily Post has had 233 blue stars to 57 for the PDN in the last few months. That's because the Daily News doesn't run local editorials. They run boilerplate from USA Today and the Gannett News Service's news service. Today is a little different. I'm going to spend a little time with their editorial today, which is from somebody named Bonnie Christian, with a K. A nice name, Bonnie Christian, who is a columnist for Christianity Today. Now, it's amazing that someone who is not only a Christian but calls herself a Christian and writes for Christianity Today could ever get on the editorial page of anything put out by Gannett.
It was rigged.
Yeah, it must have been, or somebody got fired, or somebody got canceled.
Yeah, his last name was Beelzebub.
Yeah. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the title of it is "Exit from the Mideast," and it said Biden's defense pick could help U.S. leave. And they're talking about the the forever wars that the United States has been fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan for so long that no one can even remember what we're fighting about. But Trump said he was going to bring the troops home from Iraq. He started, he didn't finish. Biden said he'll do the same thing, and he's appointed a former general named Austin. What's his first name? Lloyd Austin. He was a general in the United States Army. And he's only been retired for 4 years, which is a problem. So I'm going to pick up on that part of the editorial, which is a little bit critical of Austin, which is strange since the Gannett News Service and USA Today haven't said anything about Joe Biden that's anything but lavish praise. So here's how it goes. Next, there's the issue that Austin retired 4 years ago and, as the law states, is ineligible for the Secretary of Defense role until he has been retired from the military for 7 years. President Donald Trump's first defense secretary, retired Marine General James Mattis, also known as James Mad Dog, a real favorite of veterans of the Corps. James Mattis was similarly precluded from the role, but Congress granted him a waiver, which Biden says he hopes it will do for Austin. But the law does not provide for any such waiver. It is a flat ban with no workaround procedure. So when Congress says that, what they're doing is they're passing a joint resolution basically saying, we're not going to make any trouble over this. But it doesn't change the fact that he really is ineligible to be Secretary of Defense. I suppose someday that matter will be litigated when he does some horribly politically incorrect things and the feminazis come after him saying he shouldn't even be Secretary of Defense. Going on with the editorial, although I expect a waiver will indeed be provided, choosing a defense secretary in violation of the rule of law is not an auspicious start for reforming a foreign policy rife with wars of questionable legality at best. Beyond that procedural concern, there's also the substantive reason for the 7-year prohibition, the principle of civilian control of the military. Many of the objections to Austin on this ground, like that of conservative Elliot Cohen, who supported Mad Dog's pick, ring more partisan than principle. But the principle itself still remains, as the American founders knew well. A wise and prudent people will always have a watchful and jealous eye over their military, said Samuel Adams, and the Federalist papers devoted considerable attention to the dangers of powerful standing armies. Now, you've heard me criticize right here on Tall Tales the fact that the United States has had a standing army since Nixon did away with selective service back in 1973. I think that was a mistake. And apparently so does Ms. Christian, and so did Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams paid considerable attention to the dangers of powerful standing armies and circumstances in which the, quote, military state becomes elevated above the civil. Although he's retired, his nomination is predicated on what Biden praised as Austin's lifetime of dedicated service. His 4-year absence from active service does not negate the essence of the objection of civilian control. Moreover, his active seat on the board of Raytheon, a major military contractor, keeps that connection current while raising questions about potential for favoritism in Pentagon spending decisions. Biden, quote, ran explicitly on a platform of restoring American norms and values, said Tufts University political science Daniel Dresner in the Washington Post. But by picking Austin, he is following Trump's lead and breaking a pretty important norm. It remains to be seen whether Austin will, on balance, break other less admirable norms of U.S. foreign policy, like Washington's bias toward reckless military intervention and hubristic efforts to police the world. If Austin is confirmed, we can only hope that Biden will prove correct in his expectation that Austin will be an assist in extricating the United States from the Middle East. Well, I think this is the first time I've seen it. Someone working for a major news service who actually said something that wasn't in praise of Joe Biden. Yeah. Now, of course, there were a couple of slams at Trump anyhow. I mean, that's obligatory, right?
How many troops or wars were started during Trump's administration?
None.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think the next thing I've got to be on the lookout for is the drawing and quartering of Bonnie Christian, who had the temerity to be other than praiseworthy, and in fact, even mildly critical of Joe Biden. So look for the cancellation of Bonnie Christian. Next, I've got the Post here. The Post just wants to write feel-good editorials lately. It seems like they have lost their nerve, lost their edge, lost their fastball. They used to be edgy, hard-hitting, pulling no punches. Not today. Governor encourages Guamanians to take the Wuhan virus vaccine. It will take a lot more than that. The first batch of Wuhan virus vaccine doses are finally here, and the first vaccinations will be conducted today. Healthcare frontliners will be the first to receive the vaccine, along with senior citizens in a group home. Anything left over will be for first responders, such as police officers and firefighters. Educators have also been told they could be next in line, and so on. You know, it's just some news camouflaged as an editorial. On Guam, 119 lives have been lost to Wuhan virus 19 related deaths since March. So 119 deaths at $10,000 a throw, that comes out to, let's see, that would be, help me out here with the math, Jose. $10,000 a piece.
It would be the least she could do.
The least the governor could do, yeah.
Yeah, want to see my work?
She has this magic key on her calculator that says, it's the least I could do. Yeah. On as you were, the latest fatality was reported Monday, and he was a 44-year-old who had underlying health conditions. In a press conference Wednesday, Governor Lulian Guerrero said, while the vaccine is purely voluntary, she's encouraging Guamanians to get vaccinated. Quote, we encourage people to take the vaccine. We encourage people to do it to protect themselves and their families. Such dynamic. Who's writing this stuff for her? Yeah.
I think they're auditioning.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, such dynamic prose. She mentioned the vaccine trials and the medical experts' views that gave the vaccine the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's green light for emergency use. And on and on and on and on. And then does the Post finally get to the point? A lot of people we interviewed also tempered their optimism with caution. Many aren't sure now is the time to get the Wuhan virus shots. Many think it's too early and they want to wait until enough people have been vaccinated to see if any allergic reactions are not too severe or at least comparable to the long-standing vaccines such as flu vaccine. Well, you know, I sat down and figured it out. I don't think I'll take the shot because if everybody else does, what would be the point? There'd be no one to catch it from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I may have to rethink that. So then the editorial goes on to say, getting the public informed on the pros and cons should be part of Guam's focus. It's not enough to say people are urged to take the vaccine. One way to start meaningful conversations is for GovGuam to make medical experts available for press conferences and social media campaigns. We can't do that. Remember, we had the Physicians Advisory Council. She'll tell us what she wants to know about that, but we can't actually tune in on their meetings, and the open government law doesn't apply.
We don't have enough horses on the island.
That's true. You know, every time somebody steps out of line and says something the governor doesn't like, that's, one less horse. In addition to keeping track of the Wuhan virus fatalities, we should keep track of the horses' fatality rate, right? To build confidence in the Wuhan virus vaccine, we need to hear fewer politicians and political appointees. Not a single speaker at the press conference was a medical doctor. Yeah, well, now that Janela's not there, we might actually be able to hear what the doctors say, because Janela wouldn't be able to Janela them unless they hold it at Public Health. We need more medical professionals, primarily doctors who are more knowledgeable about the topic, to do most of the talking. I kind of resent that. If you want someone who's knowledgeable, I don't think you have to look much farther than Tall Tales. Do you, Jose?
Nope, I got a front row seat.
There you go. Okay, so much for Zemi Ikotny. Let's go to the card. And I got some program notes. And once again, if you want to tune in and see what's going to be on Tall Tales any given day, go to Jungle Watch at junglewatch.info, because Jungle Watch always posts the program notes and the card. So print your program notes and the card, grab your box of popcorn, and sit back and enjoy an episode of Tall Tales. And if you weren't able to enjoy it live, usually it's up on Jungle Watch. The latest episode is up on Jungle Watch within a half an hour from the end of the program. And if you go to Jungle Watch and Tall Tales on Jungle Watch, you can post comments on the Jungle Watch website, and you'll be communicating with literally with the entire world. So here's today's program notes. Yesterday I showed that the CCU shows that it can be arbitrary and capricious in advance when dealing with the Sunshine Law. Let's see, I lost a little bit of my program notes here. I was going to give some credit to Troy. Troy shows that Troy shines a little sunshine on the CCU and calls out the legislature for passing their silly renewable energy bill, which I'll get into in the card. And then we have our own David versus Goliath, as Lebowski takes on the medical establishment. And today the sunshine is brighter on the CCU, as Troy points out the stupidity of the legislature. Then in the People versus Dave Highsmith, you'll recall Dave Highsmith was a lawyer who got into something of a kerfuffle with Gary Gumatautau at the courthouse over what apparently was a hotly contested motion hearing. So the People versus David Highsmith provides the opportunity to reflect on trial by combat and Dick the Butcher. And then I've got some holdovers, our local social justice warriors, that's the white coats for Black Lives Matter, are educated again, and the lefties who used to be champions of freedom of speech now oppose it, and the fact that English is a microaggression for the left. That's the calendar for today. So let's start right out with Troy versus the legislature. So there's been a lot of talk about Bill 219, Joe San Augustine's Bill 219, which a few other senators have jumped on. That's the one that allows the educational institutions to, in effect, start their own power authority by mounting solar collectors on the roofs of the various buildings, taking advantage of the net metering program. That means selling power back to the Guam Power Authority and save money for the schools, but cause rates for the ratepayers of the Power Authority to increase, apparently dramatically, also causing our bondholders to consider putting our bonds into default, having a financial disastrous result for our island. So Troy does a pretty good job sometimes of pulling these things together, and this Troy story is the best story I've seen on this controversy. Here's how it goes. Our power bills will rise if senators pass a bill by Senator Joe San Augustine, according to the chairman of the Public Utilities Commission and the general manager of the Power Authority. Senators Thursday night, that's tonight, 7 p.m., will vote on Bill 219, which will convert Guam's public education institutions' power supply to solar sources of energy, while crediting the education agencies for the power supplied back into the GPA transmission and distribution system. The action creates two problems that residential ratepayers will absorb directly. The first is that those education agencies, among which Department of Education is one of GPA's biggest customers, will no longer be paying millions of dollars a year in power bills. According to GPA General Manager John Benavente, that's about $12 million annually. Residential ratepayers will have to pay to make up that amount in lost revenue so that GPA can continue to supply the island with electricity. But that's not all the ratepayers will have to foot. The electricity the schools will feed back into the system may mean ratepayers will pay even more for this public policy if enacted. There will be higher power rates as a result of this bill, stated Jeffrey C. Johnson, PUC chairman. Didn't I have an acronym for the PUC, Jose? What was it?
I'm trying to forget mine. Yeah.
You don't want to say it.
No.
If I required you to say it, you might just throw up where you sit, right?
Yes.
I got it. I'll let you go this time, Jose.
Thank you.
All right. Jeffrey C. Johnson, the PUC chairman, in testimony to senators opposing Bill 219. By authorizing these arrangements, the legislature negatively impacts the rate subsidies provided by government customers to the residential class. The impact will be an increase in residential rates. Mr. Johnson effectively called the legislation short-sighted and lacking a responsible study to back up its intent to lower power costs. He said that solar energy would be produced by the schools would be 3 times the cost of utility-scale solar energy produced by GPA. Now, GPA produces something like 25 megawatts of power with its own solar farm. So they're saying that if Joe's bill becomes law, the electricity that the schools are going to generate will cost 3 times as much as GPA's own solar farm. The story goes on to say, even if reduced fuel costs are deducted, net metering energy is more than twice as expensive as GPA-produced utility-scale solar energy. GPA already is on track to convert the island-wide power system to 50% renewable energy sources by 2030, or 5 years ahead of schedule. In less than 5 years, a quarter of the power system will be derived from renewable energy sources. The agency is in the midst of investing nearly $1 billion in power production, transmission, and distribution infrastructure upgrades all tied to its integrated resources plan that includes the conversion to renewable energy production. Yeah, but Joe San Augustine wants to get there first. Okay, we'll duck out of the sunshine here for a minute, take a short break, and I'll be right back.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
We all need to fight COVID-19, and we need all the weapons we can get to beat it. Your smartphone can be one of the most powerful tools to battle this pandemic. The Guam COVID Alert Exposure Notification app can let you know if you've been exposed to someone who has the virus. Add your phone to the COVID fight by going to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download it from the App Store or Google Play now. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So, kind of summing up to this point, the GPA doesn't have to be told that solar power is something that they ought to be interested in. They've jumped in to a great extent. They're generating 25 megawatts of solar power right now. But like everyone else that relies on solar power, they aren't able to squeeze any energy out of it at night. So they maintain that we have to keep burning oil, for a long, long time until there's some technology that would completely replace oil-driven power plants. But the Power Authority has gone that direction, and as I just read, they have plans to take it much farther in that direction. But a couple members of the legislature, Joe San Augustine, Clint, Sabina Paris, Kelly Marsh, Titano, no matter what you tell them about power rates, they can only see one color, green. And all you have to do to convince them something's a good idea is saying, we need to go green with this, and this, if we do this, we are going green. Okay, well, let me go. Let me sign up for it. Sounds right to me. This passes for a thought process at the legislature. Okay, so going with Joe San Augustine's Bill 219, first of all, would increase power rates. And then the next really nice feature about Joe's bill is this. The agency is in the midst of investing $1 billion in power production, etc. The investments are tied to revenue bonds GPA already has secured and will secure. Guam's creditors rely on those bonds, covenants, or contracts for security of their investments over the repayment terms of the bonds. If the bond covenants are broken by the Guam legislature, and they will be if Bill 219 becomes law, Guam may face default on the revenue bonds. This will cause rates to go up even further, not just for power bills, but also for the cost of the rest of the government, as other bonds would be in jeopardy. Sudden deviations from GPA's IRP, especially ones caused by political entities such as the legislature, can throw the financial integrity and the goals of this $1 million investment out of place. So, the Power Authority plans on spending $1 billion on doing the kind of thing that Joe San Augustine and the other environmental wackos are in favor of. They have sold some bonds and plan to sell some bonds to do that. But if St. Augustine's Bill 219 becomes law, those bonds will go into default. And in effect, Joe is killing what he thinks is a good idea. The proposed bill, if enacted, would limit the power and independence of the Guam Public Utilities Commission as a rate-making authority and would be a breach of the government's covenant and GPA's indenture, wrote John Wang, who is managing director of the Government of Guam's Bond Council, ORIC, in San Francisco. The government would have breached its own contractual obligation in a manner that could be a default under the GPA indenture. Indenture defaults can result in the acceleration of bonds. And what that means is this: if you have a mortgage on your house, you read it carefully, you'll find that the mortgage secures a promissory note, and somewhere in that promissory note there's an acceleration clause, which holds that if you don't make payments on, let's say you're paying $750 a month on a $200,000 mortgage, and the acceleration clause says if you don't make those payments, maybe you miss 2 in a row, the mortgagor can declare you in default and invoke the acceleration clause, which means the whole debt, every penny of it, is due today. That's what's meant by acceleration of the bonds. The concerns raised by Mr. Johnson, Mr. Beneventi, and Mr. Wang are contained in full testimonies and letters to Guam's leaders prior to the senators' debate last week on Bill 219. So there was a lot of traffic, a lot of argument, a lot of information was shared. However, Troy winds up by saying, despite these concerns, the senators voted to send the bill into the legislature's voting file to be voted on Thursday night. Now, I've commented on the instant expertise that somehow descends upon people when they are elected to the legislature. Every man, your common Joe Sixpack and Susie Schmaltz, once elected to the legislature, all of a sudden know just about everything there is to know about everything, which of course is actually my job. But, I can't expect everybody to be able to do that. And so they make incredibly boneheaded decisions. And they are able to do this because they won't pay attention to anyone who has superior knowledge in the areas in which they want to make decisions. The whole thing about marijuana in the tourist zone, this power authority solar energy flap, it's sort of like, don't confuse me with the facts. Chairman Joe San Augustine, upon listening to the testimony of John Beneventi, banged his gavel and said, don't confuse me with the facts. My mind's already made up.
I'm not buying it.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood said, I'm not buying it. Okay, so much for the power authority. Next, we've got David Lebowski versus doctors. Also, perhaps on the card as David versus Goliath. You remember, David Lebowski has had something really tragic happen to him. His 5-year-old son, what was his name? It's a biblical name.
Starts with an E, Ethan or Even, or
a biblical
or Elijah.
Name. Yeah. Died in the hospital. And David, he died. He was in the hospital overnight. Davis begged the nurse to call the doctor, begged to take him to ICU, etc. Nothing happened. And in the morning, the boy died. And David, since that time, has taken on a crusade to deal with our mandatory medical malpractice arbitration law, which holds that a person cannot sue a doctor or a hospital or a clinic or whatever for medical malpractice unless he takes his case through an arbitration procedure first.
The name of the young boy is Asher.
That's right, Asher. Yeah, Asher Lebowski. So to undergo this arbitration procedure, when you add up the fees for experts, lawyers, arbitrators, etc., it costs as much as $100,000. So anyone who would sue a doctor for malpractice has to be able to pony up $100,000 in advance before he can file suit in court, which means that nobody ever is able to file suit, which is something that was brought about by the doctors. Back in 1975, the first Arbitration for Doctors Act was passed, and the reason advanced was because we have a malpractice insurance crisis on Guam, that the cost of malpractice insurance was prohibitive, and because insurance was so expensive, it was very difficult to get doctors to come to Guam to go into practice. So the solution, the legislative solution, was to come up with a medical malpractice arbitration act, which was declared unconstitutional around 1984, and then we put another one in the early 90s. And there has been litigation dealing with the act, but so far it hasn't gone anywhere. My suspicion is, my analysis is that you won't find a court declaring our medical malpractice arbitration statute unconstitutional, although a case pens before the District Court of Guam right now, the federal court, where the judge has asked the Supreme Court if there is an exception to the requirement that a case be arbitrated before suit can be filed, if there's an exception for poor folks. She's asked the Supreme Court to tell her what Guam law is on that point. So that may work, it might not. But in the meantime, we have a legislative solution, of course. And we've got an article, Malpractice Arbitration Replacement Introduced. And this ran in the Post. Just as the 35th Guam legislature is moving to a close, Senator Therese Terlahi and, dare I mention her name, Jose?
You want me to mention it?
Go ahead.
Tello Taitagui.
Yeah, I don't have permission to mention her name. Have introduced a long-desired measure reforming Guam's medical malpractice claims law, repealing the Mandatory Arbitration Act and replacing it with a pre-trial screening process while maintaining the ability to mutually enter into arbitration. Quote, given that we're nearing the end of the term of the 35th Guam legislature, it's our intention to immediately enlist public feedback, but it is likely additional hearings on medical malpractice reform will have to be pursued in the 36th Guam legislature. Let's see, today is the 17th. You know, Therese must have a mind like a steel trap to make those kinds of calculations. We value the input of the community, of everyone in the community, and look forward to further discussion regarding this legislation, Terlahi stated in a joint release. The bill will have to be introduced in the upcoming legislature should it not pass the 35th. This measure prioritizes access to justice for victims and fairness for Guam's medical community. Now that's a stumbling block right there, because the last thing the medical community is looking for here is fairness. Fairness for Guam's medical community, particularly after the U.S. District Court of Guam recently issued an order asking the Supreme Court of Guam if is failure to comply with the medical malpractice mandatory arbitration requirement equitably excused when an indigent party cannot reasonably afford the non-administrative fees of any organization authorized to arbitrate under the Act, and no alternative means of completing arbitration is available. So that's what I mentioned about the certifying of the question to the Guam Supreme Court. Klitzkie stated, referring to a federal case challenging the constitutionality of Guam's Arbitration Act, one of a few that were recently brought before local and federal courts. The MMMA requires arbitration for malpractice claims before the matter can be taken to court. Opponents say the law bars access to courts behind a costly out-of-court procedure. The current MMAA law is about 3 decades old now and was intended to reduce the cost of health care on Guam by reducing the cost of malpractice insurance. Despite multiple legal challenges, the law has survived up to this day, even though he upheld the MMMA, Superior Court Judge Arthur Barcenas stated in one case that the Act places a burden of keeping malpractice insurance premiums low and maintaining affordable health care on one small and vulnerable sector of our society, namely non-wealthy victims of medical malpractice. Doctors have argued against its repeal, stating that would adversely affect health care access on island. They have instead requested ways to reduce the law's financial burden. A bill was introduced by Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes containing much of the recommendations from the doctors, but it has since been withdrawn. David Lebowski, who has challenged the act in court and championed a change in the law following the death of his son in 2018, thanked Titlahi and Klitzkie for their work on Bill 430-35 and for introducing the measure. He said other senators have refused to discuss the matter with him, taking, I guess, a page from the U.S. Supreme Court's book, right? They've refused to discuss the matter with him. Joe San Augustine is also committed to work on another bill to amend the MMAA. So I'm hoping for his support on this bill, Lebowski said. There will be many hurdles to getting this bill into law, but I know most of the people on Guam welcome protection from medical negligence. The successful passing of this bill will not only protect our loved ones, but will make sure those who injure or kill us are identified before they can do the same thing to another loved one. Well, I noticed I'm going to have to break here for a few minutes, and I notice I've got another Joe in the green room. So after the break, I'll take on another Joe's call, and then I'll finish up with David versus Goliath.
Coffee Day. I'm Chelsea Sneckless, and I'm the co-chair for this year's G is for Giving, as well as a proud alumna of the University of Guam. G is for Giving is an annual campaign that kicks off on the Tuesday following Thanksgiving and runs through the end of the year. Known as Giving Tuesday, it is an international day of giving, and this year's theme is Weaving Community. On Guam, we know a little something about weaving community, as we're all intertwined and interconnected in the spirit of Inaf Malik. When one of us thrives, the island thrives. This is why I support G is for Giving's mission to support scholarships, programs, and research. As an alumna, I know how difficult it is to balance going to school and worrying about how you're going to pay for school. In these uncertain times, students are even more at risk because of economic hardship beyond their control. G is for Giving aims to bridge that gap and take away at least some of the burden. For more information on how you can give, visit give.uog.edu or call the UOG Endowment Foundation at 735-2957. Have a happy and safe holiday.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagatna location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
Okay, so here we are. We got about 10 minutes before our big halftime show is 1700. And who do I have on the phone? But not the real Joe Cruz, but another Joe. Hello, another Joe.
Thank you, Bob. So yesterday I had some malfunctioning of the phone, but I want to bring up the issue of the Tomorrowland Trust. That perhaps the leaders in Guam should revisit the argument that lawyer made for it was the Department of Justice, and look to help the people go along those lines.
Are you talking about the land trust?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it wasn't the lawyer for the Department of Justice. It was Ken Orcutt from the Attorney General's office that made that. But I suspect that, lawyers talk about things, and this is complicated, but if you're going to create classes based on something that amounts to a rational state purpose, it's very easy. When you get into race, sex, and a couple of other fundamental constitutional rights, then the court applies something called strict scrutiny, which means it's almost impossible to get by that. So I suspect those lawyers sat down and they said, well, we got to get a rational state purpose here. And Ken Orcutt said, well, a lot of land was taken by eminent domain. Can't we work that in? And that's what they did, and that's the settlement they came up with. But my criticism is this. The settlement was accomplished. It saved the leases that have already been let. It prevented the case from going to trial where the government of Guam would more than likely lose. But the part I don't like is pretending that this is what... You still having trouble with your phone, Jose? I mean...
no, I'm hoping it's good still.
Yeah. So the problem I have with this whole exercise is pretending that that's what the Chamorro Land Trust was designed to do in the first place, because it wasn't. The Chamorro Land Trust was designed to put Chamorros on leased government property. That's what it was designed for. Nothing other than that. So I don't like this idea of pretending that something is not, it's not what it really is. So that's what happened. The Justice Department brought suit. In order to get out from under the suit, they came up with what I think is an imaginative solution, but they didn't have to say, well, this is why the thing was created in 1975, because it just wasn't.
Yeah. You there?
I'm still here, but we're really talking about Asher Lebowski and medical malpractice. Did you want to say anything about that, another Joe?
Oh, I want to say that I really sympathize with the father of and I apologize. I'm trying to understand again. What is it that the father is attempting to accomplish? What does the bill accomplish again?
Okay, what happened was his son died, and he's laid out a pretty good case, and even a third party came along and said that the hospital dropped the ball. So he's saying that he is unable to sue the doctor who he thinks is at fault for medical malpractice because he has to go through this complicated mandatory medical malpractice arbitration act procedure, which for practical purposes means you got to have about $100,000 up front to go through that, and then you can file suit. So he is trying to get the law changed because he said people need to have the ability to sue. He's really down on doctors, as you might imagine, and he's done everything that he can to bring attention to this matter, but I call it David versus Goliath because the folks on the other side are the medical establishment, doctors, nurses, clinics, etc., people who are very able to engage in pitched media battles with David Lebowski, who is You know, if he were going to be on the show, he'd probably be another David.
So the story was he was begging the nurses to release his, to something about it, to do something with his son?
He was begging the nurses to call the doctor to come in and see his son, or take the boy to intensive care, or do something. And according to him, the doctor wouldn't come. According to him, the nurse wouldn't do anything. The boy died.
Wow. This all happened within 24 hours?
Overnight.
Wow. Yeah, definitely sympathize. That's something that I think the Highland definitely needs to look into, like, as to if you're in this predicament and you're requesting for a doctor, and because you have good reason, you feel you have good reason for a doctor to be there, and you know, is there a way to get the doctor there? What is the reason for the doctor not being able to get there? Usually in a hospital, shouldn't they have someone doctor available on call?
Yeah, there are people called hospitalists, but, you know, we're getting kind of far afield here. Another Joe, the point of this item on the card is this, that David Lebowski has apparently made enough noise that he's got a couple of senators to step in and try to do something, although he said every other senator wouldn't even talk to him about the problem. So
I definitely want to hear more about it from the. So it's going to be Terlahi and Taigui that are going to
the co-sponsors of the bill. Yeah.
Oh, that should be good. That should be good to hear more about, because this can happen to anyone. There, but for the grace of God, go I is the expression. And you know, usually we hear about this happening in foreign countries, not so much in here. Sometimes in U.S. soil, but then they have usually, you know, they should be able to have a leak. Bring it to court? Would this happen stateside, or are we just?
I don't know of any jurisdiction that has a mandatory medical malpractice arbitration act like ours. And the doctors say that, you know, in some mainland jurisdictions, malpractice insurance is relatively affordable. It depends on what your specialty is. But the doctors are saying that if we didn't have that act, insurance carriers would charge so much for medical malpractice insurance that we'd wind up with a shortage of doctors, making the problem worse rather than better. So that doesn't
give them a blank check, right? Come up to do it, whatever.
Say again?
That doesn't give a doctor a blank check to do whatever they feel like, right?
Doctors have to conform to the standard of care that is prevalent in the community in which they practice, which nowadays is pretty much a nationwide standard. So if a doctor doesn't maintain the standard of care that a doctor would in a similar situation, he could be liable. But I got to go, another Joe, or I'm going to be, I'll have talk show liability barking at me.
Okay, I'll listen, maybe call later. Thanks.
All right, another Joe.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A deadly snowstorm. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The snowstorm pelting the East Coast leads to the death of at least 2 people in a massive pileup on I-80 in Pennsylvania. State police say as many as 60 vehicles are involved in the crash.
Really what we want you to do is really stay home if you don't need to go out. It's really critical in storms of this nature. Obviously, road conditions, weather conditions can change very quickly and lead to challenges.
Pennsylvania Emergency Management Director Randy Padfield. A 20-vehicle pileup in New York City, injuring at least 6 people. The storm's expected to hit parts of the Northeast with up to 2 feet of snow. An Alaskan healthcare worker had a serious allergic reaction after getting the Pfizer COVID vaccine. However, health officials say that person is recovering. Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services Eric Hargan tells Fox News the vaccines are safe overall and bringing hope to the country.
Healthcare workers are tired. We're all tired of this going on, but 2.9 million doses are going out this week. Hopefully 6 million of Moderna, almost 6 million doses going out. And that's going to be the beginning.
An FDA advisory panel is set to review Moderna's vaccine on Thursday. As congressional leaders try to map out a COVID relief package, the chairman of New York City's struggling subway system says the agency's averted drastic cuts for now, but the MTA chairman warns if Congress fails to come through with $4.5 billion in needed aid, the MTA will have to resort to budget cuts and layoffs. Progress on COVID talks and indications from the Federal Reserve that interest rates will likely remain near zero for at least 3 years. Sent stocks higher. The NASDAQ closing at a record high. America's listening to Fox News.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
As we usher in the holiday season, we want to express our gratitude and appreciation for the lessons that have allowed us to navigate an unprecedented year. We recognize the impact the pandemic has brought to the world and express our condolences to those who have suffered. We are focused on family and what matters most as a community. Our team at Security Title is proud of the work we do. May this holiday season bring your family renewed hope. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Security Title.
Fox News has learned the release of a report on foreign election interference won't be released next week as planned because senior intelligence analysts can't agree on China's involvement. Meantime, the FBI is revealing its counterintelligence efforts.
The FBI director says out of 5,000 open counterintelligence investigations, half involve the Chinese Communist government. A senior Justice Department official says 1,000 Chinese students fled the United States over the summer after 6 were arrested. Officials say the students were sent here by the Chinese military.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. A man accused of a crime against a Real Housewife of New Jersey's husband pleads guilty.
A man reportedly involved with the mafia pleaded guilty to charges he conspired to assault the now husband of former Real Housewives of New Jersey star Dina Manzo. John Perna admitted during a federal court teleconference of carrying out the attack in 2015 in exchange for a deeply discounted wedding reception at Dina's ex-husband Thomas Manzo's Patterson restaurant. Perna was identified as a soldier in the Lucchese crime family. According to prosecutors, Manzo hired Perna to assault his ex-wife's then-boyfriend in exchange for the reception. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
And here's your chance to blow up a Trump casino in Atlantic City.
The casino is slated to come down next month. Now, as a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club of Atlantic City, they're auctioning off the right to push the button to bring it down. The mayor hopes the auction to demolish the former Trump Plaza casino will rake in more than $1 million. The casino opened in 1984 and closed in 2014. The big boom is scheduled for January 29th. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Rolling sound, quiet, and action.
The Ray Gibson Show, starring Senator Mona Silva Tyron as the news anchor.
I'm Mona Silva Tyron, and I'll have your local news every morning. Life moves pretty fast, so stay with us to stay informed right here on The Point.
Also starring Jerry Roberts as the Better Business Training Guru.
Get out there and do something good today, like listen to us Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m., where we go extra for you.
Produced by the real Joe Cruz. And your warm and intelligent host, Ray Gibson.
It's the Gibson Stream of Consciousness. All the players and all the games with cameos and calls from the most interesting people like you. We'll see and hear you right here on your talk radio superstation. This is The Point.
The Ray Gibson Show was filmed before a live Facebook audience.
It's time to mix things up at Subway. Come in and get Subway's new barbecue chicken sandwich. Tender chicken strips topped with generous portions of sweet barbecue sauce.
Oh, yeah.
Add on crisp lettuce, onions, and tangy pickles on your favorite freshly baked bread. Perfect to satisfy just about anyone's flavor craving. It's Subway's new barbecue chicken sandwich, available for limited time only, so try it today. At Subway, make it what you want.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations. Check out the visual radio. Get the free app, available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are back at Tall Tales after that big halftime show that we've all come to love so much. It means we are in the second half of Tall Tales. I've got less than an hour to finish up another exciting, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. And I left off with David versus Goliath and a discussion of Bill 430. And this is how Bill 430 would work. It completely repeals the MMMAA, Mandatory Medical Malpractice Arbitration Act, and instead mandates that any claim for damages for personal injury or death due to alleged medical malpractice first go through pretrial screening. The Superior Court or District Court, after receiving a complaint, must seal the case and refer it to a magistrate judge, who will decide on several matters involving the malpractice complaint. If the magistrate judge finds that evidence supports the conclusion that malpractice did take place, the judge will set a monetary settlement value on the claim. Either party can then pursue trial. Parties may at any time, in accordance to any agreed terms, submit the claim to arbitration, which will be final and binding. They can also pursue mediation at any time. I can tell you right now, the doctors are not going to buy this. They ain't buying it. They're going to go to Clint, and Clint, when this bill is discussed in public hearing, will say, "I talked to the doctors. They're not buying it." Because for the doctors, the expense and complexity of the Medical Malpractice Arbitration Act is what they like. So the last thing they want to see is something simple. Then examining this on the merits, all it does is allow a magistrate judge to look at it and do what a judge would do if the case were filed. Well, actually, not even that, because if a case were filed, usually the first thing that happens is the defendant moves to dismiss. So asking the magistrate judge to evaluate the case, determine whether there is liability, and then assign a price tag to it, it's not it's not going to be probably what the doctors want, and it's probably not going to be what the plaintiff's bar wants also, because it really serves no purpose to have the magistrate judge look at it. You might just well go straight to trial if you're not going to do the arbitration. So I'm predicting that when this bill comes out, the doctors will not be in favor of it. Then there's a real novelty in the bill, and that is that if there is a claim of less than $10,000, the claim can be brought in small claims court. Yeah, small claims court is a really nice institution. It's a good place for, to deal with minor car fender benders, small debts, relatively simple cases. But to deal with something as complicated as medical malpractice in the small claims court.
What is the term preponderance? Doesn't occur there?
Preponderance. Civil cases turn on a preponderance of the evidence. But in order to prove up a medical malpractice case, you have to have expert witnesses, because I mentioned before the break that in order to recover on a medical malpractice claim, it has to be proven that what the doctor did did not meet community standards of care. And how do you find out what the community standard of care is? Well, you got to bring in an expert witness. And of course, you got to pay the expert witness, and on and on and on. I just can't see this going on in small claims court. Now, get back to the basic question. The Asher-Lebowski case is a real heartbreaker. There's just no getting around that. And you can't help but empathize with the poor kid's father, who, this all happened right before his eyes. So no one likes that. But on the other hand, there's a real risk of being Clint and Joe St. Augustine on this. Well, let's just fix this. Let's just do away with the medical malpractice. Let's do away with the medical malpractice arbitration. We don't need that. And in the process, we see doctors leaving in droves because they can't afford the medical malpractice insurance. Now, the economics of medical malpractice are this. As a general principle, doctors have what lawyers refer to as deep pockets. In other words, very seldom that you find a doctor who's got food stamps living in Section 8 housing. Maybe Paseo de Oro as they drive around in their Lexus and whatever. So, being a doctor ordinarily means that a person has a pretty good income. And that's, of course, the attractiveness of medical malpractice. If you are going to bring suit against someone who doesn't have any money, your victory will be Pyrrhic. So because of that, there's a medical malpractice bar in most jurisdictions where lawyers who specialize in suing doctors for medical malpractice. And there's also a malpractice defense bar. And because of what we're talking about here, insurance companies will insure doctors against liability for medical malpractice. But the insurance ain't cheap, especially for somebody like OBGYN, which I understand has the highest medical malpractice premiums. So doctors, like everybody else, well, not everybody else, almost everybody else feels that they start out with a proposition: if you work, you should get paid for it. The better you are at your job, the more skillful you are, the greater the reward should be. Now, that's incredibly unwoke here in the 21st century, I know. We should pay people depending on what identity group they belong to. Right, Jose?
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. So that's the complexities of the whole thing, and I would like to tell you that I've thought through it rationally, and I know how I want to come down on it, but I don't. I'm glad that the two senators have introduced the bill because it will get the matter back up on the skyline, and people who are knowledgeable in the field will speak out, and we'll all learn something in the process. Perhaps I'll learn enough to determine what the official tall tales position will be on medical malpractice, mandatory arbitration, malpractice suits, insurance, and the whole thing. And of course, once there's a ruling from Tall Tales, that's pretty much the end of it. That will be dispositive. Exactly. Okay, so next, let's go on to People versus Dave Highsmith. Dave Highsmith has been a lawyer around here, I think at least going back to 1990 or so. He's been legislative counsel. He's been in private practice. He's been an assistant attorney general a couple of times. He's at the public defender's office right now. And there was a time when he was an assistant attorney general defending a case with, or I don't know if he was defending or prosecuting, but it was a civil case. And Gary Gumatauta was on the other side of the case. And this letter to the editor, or excuse me, this story in the Post picks up on it. The incident happened quite some time ago, in August of... Yeah.
There's a little bit of audio cut also.
Yeah, the incident occurred in August of 2019, and Highsmith has just been indicted. And here's how the story goes. Assistant Public Defender David Highsmith will answer to the charges handed down in an indictment filed against him in Superior Court. Highsmith, a former Assistant Attorney General, accused of assaulting another attorney inside the judiciary of Guam in August 2019, appeared before Judge Benjamin Sison, a magistrate judge, Benjamin Sison, to be arraigned on Tuesday. Not arraigned, but make his first appearance. However, Highsmith told the court he is in the process of securing legal representation and needs more time before he can answer to the charges in court. Clyde Lemons Jr., who was appointed special prosecutor for the Office of Attorney General, did not object to the continuance. Highsmith is scheduled to appear in court on December 29. I kind of feel bad for Dave, it's Christmas time and all. The indictment was filed November 5 and charges Highsmith with an aggravated assault as a third-degree felony. Assault is a misdemeanor, reckless conduct is a misdemeanor, and official misconduct is a misdemeanor. On August 1, 2019, Highsmith, who handled civil litigation, was booked and released on charges of assault following an alleged incident involving attorney Gary Gumatauta. Gumatauta said he and Highsmith were discussing a case involving a jet ski license in Judge Anita Sokola's courtroom. He said he was representing a corporation that had gone bankrupt when Highsmith accused his client of misconduct. Gumatauta contended the case had been dismissed following an agreement between the parties involved. It was after they both walked out of the courtroom into an area of the Guam Judicial Center that Gumatauta said Highsmith told him, "Who do you think you are?" Before Highsmith allegedly punched and body slammed him onto the floor. Sounds like this, what's it called? The
MMA?
Yeah, the MMA, martial, what is it?
Mixed martial arts.
Mixed martial arts, yeah.
The
other MMA, right?
The other MMA.
Yeah. Mixed martial arts. Body punched him and body slammed him onto the floor. Gumatauta was hospitalized and suffered cracked ribs, a broken wrist, soreness on his side, hip, back, and spine, and a concussion.
I think he blacked out.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
what the
mistaken.
paper said, yeah. So I guess Highsmith all this time has been wasting his time as a lawyer. Highsmith is also appealing his termination from the Attorney General's office before the Civil Service Commission. He contends the punishment against him was, quote, too severe. So I think in my 45 years as a member of the bar, this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this here. We had an incident like this in Saipan one time, but I don't think it's ever happened here. So it kind of reminded me of just some of the hijinks of the profession one way or another. And, once upon a time, we had something called trial by ordeal. We had trial by ordeal, and then we also had trial by combat. And trial by ordeal meant this: if a person went to a criminal trial to find out whether he were guilty or not, they would do things like give him a red-hot poker, and if he could hang on to the red-hot poker long enough, obviously he was innocent.
Throw him in the ocean, see if he floats.
Yeah, if he didn't float, obviously he was guilty. And then after that, we went to trial by combat. So if two people had a dispute, they'd go outside and fight. And the winner of the fight was adjudged the winner of that particular contest. So I want to talk a little bit about killing all the lawyers next. But before I do that, I notice I've got one of our top-notch callers on the line here who wants to talk about Highsmith versus Gomatauta. That's Dr. Tom Poole. Good afternoon, Tom.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Judge. It's just that, Judge, I know both of these men. I like both of them. And I wasn't there, so I didn't witness what happened. But if I were going to be assaulted and body slammed by anybody on this island, David Highsmith is going to be near the top of that list. David there's just no way that David could do a very good job of that. I don't think that David could handle the toughest kid in any third grade elementary school on this island. I just don't think so. I just find all this a little absurd that David could physically manage this if he wanted to. And so, as I said, I wasn't there, but David he's not in good health at all, and he's a small guy. Gary's probably got 20, 30, maybe 40 pounds on David anyway. I'm not buying it somehow, Judge.
Well, when this all happened, I've known Dave in several different contexts, and my initial reaction was, this is completely out of character for David Highsmith.
For sure.
Absolutely. And David Highsmith, if I were to find a job for him, it would be teaching English literature at some Midwest liberal arts private college where he could wear a tweed sport coat with leather elbow patches to work every day.
He's not your MMA guy.
No, he just doesn't come across as a brawler at all.
No, sir. So I hope this thing has a happy ending for David, because I just find this absurd.
Well, that's why we have courts and trials and things like that, to see how these things are going to come out.
Okay. Thank you for letting me opine, Judge.
As long as I've got you on the line here, I don't know if you were listening the day after you called and we were talking about dogs and Air Force rifles and things like that. And I asked you why there seemed to be this affinity between men and dogs, and you explained your theory. And then the next day, I repeated a theory that I had stumbled across, that in a sense, dogs had invented themselves.
Yes, sir. I did hear that, and I found that I didn't, and I actually even searched a little bit for the article you were talking about, because that sounded like it had to be an awful lot of conjecture and not a lot of archaeological evidence or things like that. I'm not saying that I know that it's wrong, but
Well, the name of the program is Tall Tales, after all. But go on.
that might be one a little bit, because we did an awful lot of work on dogs, like you said. There's no doubt we started with wild, canines, wolves and that sort of thing, and just as you said, turned them into Chihuahuas and stuff, and the Chihuahuas didn't do that. The dogs didn't do that to themselves. We've done an awful lot of work on these dogs over the last 50,000 years or so.
The theory is that the gene, or whatever it is, that provides for a tamer wolf also comes packed with a shorter snout, something like a bark instead of a howl. So as the tamer dogs had more and more access to the dump and bred those characteristics, the wolves became tamer, more like dogs, and easier for man to tame. And I'll see if I can find it when I get home, but the Russians did a study back in the 1920s with foxes and tried to duplicate those conditions, and that's the result that they got. That after some selective breeding, they wound up with foxes that looked kind of like dogs.
It could be. The more important point to me is that however we got to where we are, we have this relationship with dogs where they expect, to do certain things for us in return for certain things. And so we have a much different relationship with dogs than we do with wild animals and that we do with farm animals. And that's actually recognized in federal law, and that we had to really stop most of the research that we were doing on dogs and cats back in the 80s, because it was recognized that, these aren't the same kind. These aren't just lab animals, one each like everything else. These are a little bit different.
Like lawyers.
And so, you're right. So, yeah, they would make the best. We've talked about what great lab animals they would make and all the reasons why. But so they really are a little different, and that's why it is. That's why people do. Why is everybody so upset about this dog getting nailed with this, high velocity pellet? Well, it's because dogs, they really are a little different.
That's true, and I would express it this way, Tom, that man is the dog's best friend.
Probably so, and sometimes worst enemy. But yes, sir, I think we are that way. We are each other's best friends in the best of circumstances.
Okay, well, thanks for calling, and we'll watch the criminal trial of People versus Highsmith like a hawk and keep you posted on it, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Bye now.
So long.
I heard some of the historical domestication process included a couple of Highsmiths.
For
gentle domestication.
Gentle domestication. Okay, then I've got Ron McNinch who wants to talk about MMA lawyers. Go for it, Ron.
Hey, Happy Day Thunder, Happy Day Guam. Hey, I was just going to mention, while you're still talking about animals, there are cat people and there are dog people. And I'm definitely a dog person. I don't like cats. And then I read a study like last year that if your house cat could, it would pounce on you, kill you, and eat you. I don't know if you saw that or read that. But that's how much cats care about people. And dogs are entirely different. They're loyal and faithful.
I understand that the difference is that cats want to show you who's boss. Dogs just want to be your friend.
Yeah. And if you ever live in Washington, D.C. and work, if you want a friend, you should get a dog. That's the old
Harry
saying.
Truman, yeah.
Yeah, from Truman, yeah. The funny thing is, one other quick thing about domestication is that dogs basically, over time, absolutely have genetically patterned to people. And it's a very well-documented effect. And we have that special relationship with them. But it's very, very cool. But getting back to MMA lawyers, I know both Mr. Highsmith and Mr. Gumatowsau. I hold Mr. Highsmith in very high regard. He was my attorney about 20 years ago. He did a great job. And he's very quiet-natured, if you know him. He's not a loud person. He's not, the kind of person you would ever think would have some kind of altercation like this. And so I certainly, for me, it was something very uncharacteristic, not in his nature at all. And I certainly hope that things would be sorted out. And it could just be sometimes when people have these kinds of altercations, it doesn't mean it was absolutely purposeful, the thing that happened. That is, you push somebody or shove somebody and they fall down or hit their head or something. That's not the real intent. And so certainly I would like to one thing, I'm going to watch the trial very, very closely also and just see exactly what were the circumstances that led up to this event and see where it went. But from everything I know about David, and he was my lawyer for over 2 years, did a great job. He was very deliberate and very quiet in terms of his nature. He never exhibited any kind of nature or characteristic I would think would be the kind of person who would do something with a criminal intent like that. And so I certainly hope that it gets resolved deliberately.
Well, as I said, when I was talking with Dr. Poole, I'm going to watch it like a hawk, and I will keep our international radio listening audience informed as to what's going on. So I got a break for the seventh inning stretch, Ron. Good talking to you again.
Hey, always great to talk to you, sir.
So long.
Okay.
It's always the quiet ones, Judge.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark with nobody in it today, except probably some snow out there in those center field bleachers. So here we are back at the historic studios of The Point in Upper Tumum on Marine Corps Drive, and we've been talking about Gary Gumatautau and Dave Highsmith. And I deviated slightly when I had Dr. Tom Poole on the line. Dr. Tom Poole is the territorial veterinarian, and we had a really interesting chat about somebody who shot at a stray dog with a very powerful air rifle. And Tom called in and related some really important facts on that matter. And we got into the relationship between dogs and men and people. And you picked up on that, and Tom told us that in the 80s, the national government cracked down on veterinarians using dogs as medical lab animals, experimental animals.
I remember there was a push also to stop lab testing right on animals.
Yeah, well,
that's a marketing thing now.
Right. So Tom mentioned that, and then I mentioned that maybe we could use lawyers. And that brings me back to a joke that Tom actually told on Tall Tales one time. some may have heard it, but it's a good joke, so I'll tell it again. This is a factual statement that they're not using dogs for lab experiments at Harvard Medical School anymore. They found several reasons that not to use dogs. They're using lawyers instead. And there are several reasons to use lawyers for medical experiments instead of dogs. First of all, there's much less likelihood that the lab assistants will perform a personal attachment to them. Second reason they're using lawyers instead of dogs is that they're much more numerous. And third reason they're using lawyers for medical experiments instead of dogs is there are some things that you can't even get a dog to do. Yeah, so I want to go from there to the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. But I notice I've got somebody ringing in here. I'll take this phone call before I go to the first thing we'll do, let's kill all the lawyers. It's from a Shakespeare's play. Yeah, I've got Senator Duenas who wants to talk about dogs. Perhaps Senator Duenas wants to tell us that the legislature has gone to the dogs since he left. Is that correct, Chris?
You stole my line, Your Honor. Honorable Marine, Senator, my favorite talk show host. I was just telling Jose Martinez, I will not allow tall tales to go to the dogs.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. But I have to say, definitely, if we're going to measure, if we were going to measure the 35th, I would have to certainly say that on many occasions and on many decisions and non-decisions, certainly has gone to the dogs.
I wonder if you're being completely fair when you say that, Chris. There may be some dog owners that take offense to your remarks.
You know what? Actually, I'm calling to just tell you about my affection for dogs, and also I want to talk a little bit about David and Goliath, or David and Gumatauta as well.
Okay.
Highsmith Gumatauta. But no, I have a little story about dogs. I'm a total dog lover. I've always in my life have had Boonie dogs, and I love them absolutely. But I was never really a house dog guy. I took very good care of them, either leashed or in kennels and stuff like that, and my dogs were always well taken care of. But I made the switch. My brother was breeding American bullies, and I just fell in love with this dog. And so when she had her litter, I got one of the pups, and so I decided, well, I'm gonna make the leap. I tried it a couple of times, and I studied really hard. I made the leap, and I'll tell you, Bob, I'm gonna be heartbroken when she leaves me, and goes to dog heaven. But I will never do it any other way. I will always work hard to train and have my dog inside the house, because she's just an absolute sweetheart, but also just a very loyal and wonderful guard dog as well. I mean, when there's somewhat of a difference when they're in the house and outside of the house. I mean, they still do a good job outside, but when they're inside the house, I'm telling you, you have to really introduce them to company before you have them in the house, because they really guard the house well. And I'm a dog lover for sure. One other story, a good friend of mine that worked at Gain for a long time, and I wonder sometimes if Tom Poole is still listening, if he'll confirm this when he calls in on another issue. Dogs at Gain, I wanted to make a shout out in case people are looking for gifts for their kids' animals. First of all, Boonie dogs are the best. They're very resilient to Guam and everything else. But
isn't there a scientific name for those animals? I think it's Bunis dogus, isn't it?
Right. Okay, I'll stand corrected then. I recommend the Bunis dogus. But But Bob, really, a friend of mine who worked there for a while, he truly believes this. It's like that he and owners have told him this before. I mean, those dogs are most especially loyal. They like know for some reason when you went and got a dog at game at the pound, they for some reason they know that you saved their life, and they're like they go the extra mile. They're a lot more. They're extremely loyal animals, from what I understand, and I've gotten this information from different people who have gone and picked up animals from the shelter, that they're really, 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 they're just all the way home, the tail is wagging, and they know that they've escaped a bad fate. But one other thing on this issue, David Highsmith also, I got to say, it was an excellent attorney representing the Department of Youth Affairs when I was the director there, and helped me through a lot of trials and tribulations with regard to civil service cases and stuff. And he's a good lawyer, and I agree with most of the all of the characterizations from callers that he's not an MMA fighter, and he's he's a good lawyer. He's a fighter as a lawyer, but his personality is quite docile, actually. So I was a little surprised that my friend Gary, what's interesting about that is every time I think about him, I think about that lawsuit that he had when he was, I guess, flying on United Airlines, and I think there was a person that had a comfort animal that was a cat, and it got loose and did its number on him, and he filed suit with United Airlines. So I think he's kind of known for that, and maybe the description was quite over the top on that one. I guess he got his settlement out of it, but I'm going to follow this too. It's going to be interesting, but David might have given a push or so, but I definitely don't see David Highsmith either throwing a body slam and some of the other stuff going on there. So it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, Bob, just thought I'd catch up with you on some maybe trivial stuff other than our normal legislative stuff. But when I have some interesting stuff coming out next week, and I'll call you on it, standing rules issues and things that I'm going to make recommendations to the oncoming majority, and so it'd be fun to talk about.
Yeah, well, standing rules, I just want to make one comment. I would hope that we do away with quarterbacks during voting. That people either ready. Vote yay or nay and not pass.
Get ready.
Okay, good talking to you, Chris.
That recommendation will be forthcoming. Catch up with you next week, Bob.
Okay. All right, so I got another caller here waiting in the green room. It's a caller who wants to make his mark about Highsmith and Javier Atalig, one of those hotly contested trials. So go ahead and make your mark, caller.
Hello, Your Honor.
Hi.
So on Highsmith, I've only had one actual personal observation where I was in a hearing for the Allied Board of Health Examiners, and he was representing the government. And I'm actually up here by Paga, so if you lose me, I should come back right on.
Okay.
So he had, I guess, requested a hearing against Doug Moylan's client. I won't mention what doctor it was, but the notice was given was not properly. The defendant's attorney was not properly noticed. So Doug Moylan said, this is not a valid hearing because we weren't properly noticed. And the hearing officer agreed because of the date. It was delivered like 2 days late to be properly noticed. And Highsmith blew a cork and called the hearing officer an idiot and a bunch of other stuff. And
wow.
That's what I remember. That's what I remember from Highsmith. Because he didn't get his way, he seemed like a petulant child, and and my wife was with me too, and she can vouch for that as well. We were supporting the defendant who was the hearing was called for, and Highsmith just blew a gasket And he went off at Moylan. He went off at the hearing officer. And that's my personal interaction with Attorney Heisman. So, everybody else talks really great about him. I don't know if that was just a really bad day for him. But, yeah, that I'm just putting in my 2 cents.
Well, that's interesting, Mark. Thanks.
And then on Gabriel Talik, I did a little research on what he submitted, and basically the person who supposedly won the election signed on his election commission documentation that he lived at an address from November 2019 up until the election, and Gabriel turned in a lease that showed that someone else lived there up until March of 2020, and they also signed that the gentleman did not live with them in the house. So that's the basis of Javer's challenge, is that he signed the document that said that he lived in a residence that actually belonged to his father, but it was leased out to somebody else up until April of the following year.
I see.
So yeah, so that's the gist of it. And he has, I saw I believe he has affidavit and video testimony from the tenants at the time saying they didn't leave the residence until March the 25th. So how could that guy have been living in that residence from November?
Well, that's a good point, Mark. And of course, the question I ask, I've had some dealings with the Election Commission myself. How could the Election Commission overlook something like that? And I furnished an answer to that when I talked about Javier's case, and that is that the Election Commission seems very adept at finding the right answer to a question, which oftentimes
I remember you saying that
is not the correct answer.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, so basically I'm pretty sure like that whole fiasco with the Agana thing where people said they lived in Agana and they were precinct officials, and come to find out it was an abandoned house, and I forgot what the other issue was. But yeah, so we'll just have to wait and see when the court date is set and the judge makes his ruling. But like you said, even if he makes his ruling that it's too late to actually rule and remove the certified winner, the certified winner may have committed a crime by filling out the form. It's a notarized form.
Yeah.
And signing that he lived at that residence.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, it would be a good job for the Attorney General if it's as it sounds like a crime was committed there, and our Attorney General ought to pick it up and run with it.
Or we may have to Google it
to find out what our Attorney General's doing, which lawsuit. I was amazed to find that our Attorney General had joined some of the lawyers that were criticizing the Trump appeals, the Texas versus Pennsylvania case. Several lawyers
versus the 4 states. Yeah,
versus the 4 states. Several state attorneys general chimed in opposition to Texas, and our Attorney General was one of them. Yeah, it's just amazing that he has this ability to join whatever case he feels like joining. Not only not getting our permission, but not even telling us about it.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, it's a Democratic administration. Maybe he talked to them about it before he chimed in, but you're going to have to FOIA that.
I guess I'll do that. Good call, Mark. Thanks for calling.
All right. Thanks. You have a good rest of your day, Judge. Bye.
So I saw another Joe. That was one of another Joe's shorter calls. He was there for about 2 seconds and he was gone. So Jose is trying to get another Joe on the line for his second ride on the Ferris wheel. And I'm hoping that while we're doing that, we can go to the Churchill Downs for this and start the home stretch.
Buying a house, apartment, or condo? Selling your home or property? Or maybe you're renting a house, apartment, or condo on Guam. Whatever your real estate needs are, you can count on the professionals at Horizon Properties to take care of you. Call Horizon Properties at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonproperties.com or follow them on Facebook at Horizon Properties Guam. Maria Miller and the professionals at Horizon Properties. All you need to know in real estate.
Did you know your smartphone is one of the most powerful tools in our fight against COVID-19? That's why we're bringing you the Guam COVID Alert Exposure Notification app. Developed by Google, Apple, and the PathCheck Foundation, the app works by letting you know if you've been exposed to someone who's positive. It's completely voluntary, and more importantly, it's anonymous. Add your phone to the COVID fight. Go to guamcovidalert.guam.gov or download it from the App Store or Google Play now. Help Guam stop COVID-19.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So we're heading down the home stretch from Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. I got about 8 more minutes of Tall Tales, and then it'll be all over for another day. And as so often happens, another Joe is going to ride down that home stretch with me. Good afternoon again, another Joe.
Hey, go. I just can't help but call again. It's a very interesting topic. So I was just curious regarding the Attorney General's opposing the appeals in our national election for the President of the United States. Well, my comment, I guess my comment is that the Attorney General himself is an elected official, right?
Yes.
So the next time he comes up is in another 2 years, right, for election?
He's up for election the same year as the governor, so it'll be 2022.
It's definitely something to remember for all of you who are Trump supporters and pro-lifers, and all sorts of reasons to want to get to the bottom of all these issues, the truth, so to speak. Ordinarily, Uncle Bob, I don't know that I pay much attention to all this. But I just have to say that Trump was not my first choice. It was Jeb Bush, but he kind of grew on me, I guess. He advertised himself as anti-corruption, and he wanted to drain the swamp, and that's been a consistent message throughout his campaign and his presidency. And so why would anyone be surprised that he's continuing his what he said he was going to do from the start?
Well, you know, when we get to election time, almost from every quarter you hear, I want change. And then we elect the same kind of people that we've been electing for the last 100 years and wonder why there's never any change. If you're going to get some change, you're going to have to elect somebody who's a little different.
This time we got loose change.
Yeah, and like him or not, Trump is different. And then the other thing that the other ratio decidendi that I brought to it is that you take every bad thing that you can say about Trump, and let's assume for the purposes of discussion that they're all true. How did such a person ever get elected president? If he's so bad and it's so obvious, and I have my own answer, and my answer is this: it's because of the overreach of the left. People really got tired of somebody in Washington saying that if little Johnny wants to use the girls' toilet at school, you have to let him, or you're going to be in a heap of trouble. And all of this other woke nonsense that the Democrats have brought before us, and that's how Trump got to be president.
not only that, Bob, it's not even a conversation or dialogue. It's hostility. It's either this way or you're really bad. You're a bad person for opposing.
You'll be canceled.
The cancel culture and our marching orders. Which brings me to another question, Uncle Bob, about you're talking about the contest for vice mayor of 20? Is that what you're?
That's
you're
right. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So these are two Republicans, and my question is does the vice mayor, are they there to assist the mayor?
No. This is not a good system. Each mayor runs on its own ticket, so you could have and it happens where you have a Democrat mayor and a Republican vice mayor. They don't run on a ticket; they run for individual offices. The mayor has absolutely no authority over the vice mayor. The mayor could say, "I want you here in the office at 8 o'clock every morning. I'm ready to go to work," and the vice mayor can say, "Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I want you to go pack sand, because I ain't going to do it. What are you going to do about it?"
Nope.
Yeah, and it's not a good system at all. And starting out with the proposition, I'm not so sure that even having mayors is really necessary. But if we do, we don't need two mayors in any of the villages, and that's what we have. The only difference between the mayor and the vice mayor is that one makes more money than the other, and they both make a whole lot more than they're worth.
And so would this be considered moral turpitude? The questioning of whether the candidate should have run because he didn't qualify according to the rules, would that be considered moral turpitude?
False swearing is moral turpitude. It could be classified as a crime of moral turpitude.
Okay, Uncle Bob, thanks for the very good information. I'll just keep listening.
Okay, real Joe, another Joe. Okay, so I got just a few more minutes here to wrap up another exciting episode of Tall Tales. Maybe I can do justice to this old saying: the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. The inscription on a novelty mug for sale at the Shakespeare Theater Company's gift shop in Washington always gets a rise out of veteran trial lawyer David Epstein. It isn't the line itself, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. It's that so few people see it his way. Shakespeare wasn't knocking lawyers, much less endorsing a litigicidal rampage. He says, but defending them. I'm a lawyer. I get the humor, but I don't like this target on my back. Epstein is among an unhappy band of lawyers who are toiling to, as they view it, set the record straight. And you hear that every once in a while. You know what Shakespeare said? Shakespeare said, first thing we do is let's kill all the lawyers. Well, I ain't buying it. Okay, I'll devote a few minutes to this at the beginning of the show tomorrow. We've come to the end of another rainbow here on Tall Tales, so we'll be back tomorrow for our last episode of this week at 1600, 4 o'clock. We'll see you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The VP will get the shot Friday. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. Vice President Mike Pence, his wife, and the Surgeon General will get a COVID vaccine live on camera at the White House to encourage other Americans to get protected from the deadly virus. Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson tells Fox News it's important to know who's vulnerable.
It's not just elderly people. It can be young people who have obesity or who have diabetes or who have some respiratory issues.
President-elect Joe Biden is expected to receive the vaccine as soon as next week. U.S. officials say they're actively negotiating for additional purchases of Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine after passing up chance to lock in a contract this summer. California having